The morning mist lay heavy over the military garrison as a chill wind swept across the empty parade ground. A young private stood at the checkpoint, his posture straight, his eyes sharp, and his rifle firmly in his hands. He had been assigned to guard duty for weeks, but each morning he carried himself as if it were the first time. The orders he had been given were simple, yet absolute. No one, no matter the rank, was to pass through without proper identification. The rules were strict, and the private knew very well that his own safety and the security of the base depended on his ability to follow them. Without hesitation, the hours passed slowly. The occasional officer arrived, presented documents, and continued on their way. Some nodded politely at the young soldier, others simply walked past, without a word. But none of that mattered to him. His focus was on duty, not on recognition or greetings. He had been raised on the belief that discipline is the foundation of a soldier, and that obedience to rules was not optional, but sacred. As the grey clouds shifted above, a dark sedan appeared on the road, moving steadily toward the checkpoint. Its polished surface gleamed even in the dull light. The private instinctively tightened his grip on the rifle and raised his hand, signaling for the vehicle to halt. The car came to a stop, and from it stepped a tall figure in a uniform so heavily decorated it almost seemed to shine with authority. Medals glistened across his chest. Golden stars rested proudly above his heart. His hat bore the emblem of the highest rank. The man was a marshal, a legend in the army, known and feared, respected and saluted by all. Yet here he was standing at the barrier, expecting as always to pass without question. The marshal's gaze was calm but commanding. His very presence carried weight. It was not arrogance, but the natural confidence of a man who had long been accustomed to unquestioned obedience. The private felt the pressure, yet his training echoed in his mind. He raised his hand again firmly and said in a steady voice, "Sir, I must see your identification before you can pass." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The marshal's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in surprise. He had not heard such words in years. Usually soldiers scrambled to lower barriers before he even stepped out of his vehicle. He looked at the private, closely studying the determination in his face, and replied, "Young man, do you understand who I am? I am the marshal of this army. I do not show documents at checkpoints." But the private did not flinch. He remembered every instruction given to him and every warning from his commander that breaking the rule even once could open the door to danger. "With respect, sir, the rules are the same for everyone. Without documents, I cannot allow you to pass." The driver behind the marshal shifted uncomfortably, clearly anxious at the situation nearby. A few officers watched, stunned by the boldness of the private. No one dared to intervene. The barrier remained down. The silence stretched, but the young soldier stood like a rock, his hand on the rifle, his eyes firm. The marshal tilted his head as if measuring the weight of the moment, and then slowly he reached into his coat and produced his identification card, handing it to the private. The soldier took it, checked it carefully against the list, and only then stepped aside and saluted sharply. Lifting the barrier, the marshal returned the salute, his expression unreadable, before walking back to the car and driving into the base. What had just taken place seemed simple, yet in that small act, something profound had happened. The private had proven that discipline and loyalty to duty outweighed fear of rank. He had dared to uphold the rules, even in front of the highest authority. And though the marshal said nothing in that moment, he felt a deep respect growing inside for the young man who did not bend. The whisper of the event began to spread among the soldiers in the base. Some laughed, saying the private would be punished for his audacity. Others pitied him, certain he would be reassigned to the harshest tasks. But the private himself felt no fear. His conscience was clear. He had done what was required of him. What happened next would soon change his life forever. The following day, the private was summoned to headquarters. He marched with steady steps, though inside his heart was heavy with uncertainty. Many of his fellow soldiers had warned him that no one dares to stop a marshal, and that he would surely be punished for his stubbornness, but he reminded himself that he had only followed the orders given to him, and if that was a crime, then he was ready to accept the consequences. When he entered the large office, he was stunned to see the marshal himself standing there, tall, composed, and dignified. The air was heavy with silence, and the private saluted firmly, awaiting whatever judgment was to come. The marshal studied him for a moment, then spoke with a voice calm, yet commanding. "Soldier, yesterday you showed me something rare. You did not tremble at my rank, nor surrender to fear. You held your post as a true guardian of the army's honor, and you reminded me of what discipline really means." The private blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. He expected anger, but instead, he found respect in the marshal's eyes. The marshal continued, "Many men would have stepped aside simply because of the stars on my shoulders. But you did not bend. You knew your orders, and you carried them out faithfully. That is the mark of a true soldier." The private swallowed hard, not knowing what to say. He stood silent, but inside he felt pride rising in his chest. Then the marshal did something unexpected. He removed one of his own medals, a decoration earned through years of service and sacrifice, and held it out to the young man. "This is not a gift for your rank, but for your courage. It is a reminder that even the greatest authority must obey the same rules that protect us all. Take it and wear it with honor." Trembling, the private accepted the medal, his hands shaking as he looked at the symbol of recognition far beyond what he could have imagined. Whispers of the event spread quickly. Throughout the garrison, the tale of the soldier who stopped a marshal became legend, retold among the barracks as a lesson of discipline and integrity. Some soldiers admired him. Others still shook their heads in disbelief, but no one could deny the truth that his loyalty to duty had brought him respect from the very top. In the weeks that followed, the marshal often spoke of him in meetings, saying that the strength of the army was not in its highest ranks, but in the devotion of its lowest four. If a private could stand firm for the rules, then the entire structure of the army remained strong and unshakable. The young soldier continued his service, never seeking glory, never boasting of the moment that had changed his fate. He wore the medal, not with pride of self, but with pride of principle, for he knew that he had acted not for reward, but because it was right, and that knowledge gave him a quiet strength. Through the years, the story lived on. It was told to new recruits as a shining example of discipline and courage, and it reminded generals and privates alike that true honor lies not in the rank on the shoulder, but in the steadfastness of the heart. And so the private who once stopped a marshal at the gate became more than a soldier. He became a symbol of integrity, a reminder that even the greatest authority is bound by the same duty, and that the soul of an army rests not in its stars and medals, but in the simple courage of those who serve faithfully, without fear and without compromise.